Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who didn't join us this morning, my name is Ed Frank. I'm the CEO of Access Innovation, broadcasting you live from Tel Aviv. It's our special privilege today to welcome Ola Källenius, the CEO and chairman of Daimler and Mercedes-Benz, who had the pleasure of hosting in Israel about 5 years ago when he was the head of global sales and marketing at Mercedes. At the time, we actually had the pleasure of showing him many Israeli companies. And what I remember from that visit was how, for the team of Mercedes colleagues who joined, Ola was very focused on trying to tell people there is really one action item we must come out of this meeting. And we've hosted many corporations through the years, but that very sharp focus has led Mercedes to really very exciting places. And you're going to be hearing about some of the changes that have undergone the company since Ola's taken over. So Ola, it's really a pleasure to welcome you back. I'm sorry that you can't be here with us in person. We are hoping that will happen soon, and we hope the world will come to a better place. But in the meantime, we have people from more than 33 countries joining us today, very interested to hearing about the future of mobility from one of the world's most innovative people. Ola, thank you very much for joining us and for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Ed, and it's great to be with you today. As you said, I would have loved to be there on location and also meet with our team in Tel Aviv, but soon that's going to be possible again. If we look at what's going on in the auto industry, we're in a massive transformation. You could almost say disruption. This industry will not look the same 10 years from now. But this is a transformation that has already been going on for a few years. And that's what I want to talk about today. What's our game plan? How do we see this future play out? How do we keep this brand promise of Mercedes, really a promise of being part of something special, high tech, and a promise of a better future? And I want to focus mostly in my presentation, and I know we have a dialogue and a Q&A afterwards. I'm looking forward to that conversation on the two major trends that drive this transformation. And those two major trends are digitization and decarbonization. Not just digitization of the product per se and making the car an embedded thing in the Internet of Things, but also the digitization of how we make the product and how we change the way we work in our company. And of course, decarbonization. There are no two ways about it. We got to make the Paris Agreement happen. And we have made a firm commitment. It's part of the core of our strategy to define what the future of sustainable mobility looks like. But I'm going to start with digitization. Here you see a picture of an S-Class in the late 80s. Believe it or not, the whole topic of connected car is not something that's just happened here recently or in the last 10 years or so. Already then, the engineers were thinking about how can we introduce modern technologies into a vehicle, and how can we make the vehicle something more than just moving from A to B, and in this case, a rolling office. If we fast forward about 30 years later, this is what that is going to look like. This is the hyper screen that is going to come in the new EQS that we're launching this summer. The world premiere is about 4 weeks away. So stay tuned for an exciting event that we will show digitally to the world in the middle of April. We had a teaser of this with the hyperscreen as a tasting sample that we showed at the Digital CES this year. Not only is this screen with over 1.40 meter wide, curved, full OLED, bonded Gorilla Glass, you know, the whole 9 yards type of thing. Not only is it a piece of technological art, what is even more impressive is the functionality, the software stack, and the connectivity that this car leads to. In essence, in this vehicle, the whole dashboard is a digital, beautiful digital interface to the world for the driver, for the passenger, and also in our multi-seat entertainment for the people that are riding in the back. So we're upping the game in terms of creating this beautiful digital space embedded in an environment in a Mercedes that looks like maybe a living room furnished with expensive, good-looking Italian furniture. Software is the key. and mastering the software stack. Here are only 3 examples of areas where we have significantly increased also our vertical integration over the last years. On the one hand is what we call MBUX software, so that the obvious thing, what the customer sees and feels right away. This is connected car, this is all the telematic functions, this is the user interface to the customer. We launched the first version of this back in 2018, and we're now on the 2nd generation that was launched in the S-Class, and you just saw the hyperscreen coming in the EQS. We have taken this software now largely in-house, and we're writing the code for this, and we're creating an environment that is special and also has a Mercedes digital luxury feel. Autonomous driving assistance systems, something that I'm gonna also in a few slides talk more about. This is changing driving. Not only is it gonna make driving a lot safer, ultimately it's also gonna take quote unquote the driver out of the picture, and the car is gonna drive itself in some situations. And then as part of electrification, efficiency is gonna be name of the game. And knowing how you design a vehicle in all aspects to use the energy in the best way, and the energy is even a bit more precious in an electric vehicle than what we have been used to in combustion-based vehicles, where you have, so to speak, more or less enough energy. So things like battery management systems and knowing what to do and what buttons to push is going to be crucial for competitiveness. If we start talking about autonomous drive, yes, if you would have asked me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if you would have gone to the CES in Las Vegas or talked to also a lot of companies in Israel, if you heard what we said back then, you would have thought that every city by now would have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, robo-taxis running around and moving everybody around. It's not been quite that quick, but that doesn't mean that technological progress hasn't been made. It has been massive, and a lot more is coming here in the next years. As far as Mercedes is concerned, we have 2 things that are groundbreaking that we're doing this year. One is we are going to attempt now in Europe, in Germany, to certify for the first time in a production vehicle at scale a level 3 system as a traffic jam assist on the highway. Why is it such a big deal? If you move from level 2 to level 3, the liability moves from the human to the computer. And really, you as a company are fully responsible for everything that happens when the car drives itself. That's why it's such a big deal. It's not just a technological challenge. It's also something that you have to look at from a legal point of view and product liability point of view. But we are far along, and we are in the final testing cycles now of this system, and hope to be able to launch that in the second half of this year, and that would be truly groundbreaking. In the shadow of that, but no less exciting, is actually the first full level 4 parking system. This is a combination between technology in the car and in the infrastructure. We're developing this together with a company here in Stuttgart as well, Bosch, that you all know. And we have some pilots running. This is where you can literally step out of the vehicle, and in a parking garage, the vehicle parks itself. And the car can guide itself and gets guided through infrastructure that's put into the parking garage. That's a convenience feature that we are, I believe, also the first ones to introduce now in the S-Class, but something that I foresee in the future maybe becomes standard operating procedure one day. If you take a holistic view of what this means, it means that the brain and the central nervous system of the car needs to be in your control. We call that the Mercedes-Benz operating system. And we have taken the first step towards this complete software stack. As I mentioned, starting in the domain of connected car infotainment, but literally going to go through the whole car, consolidate also the computing hardware in the car that is going to get so much more performant in the years that are coming here. So we really have a supercomputer on wheels with a software stack. We think, as Mercedes, to be in direct link with the customer and control the customer interface and have a Mercedes Me ID that you log into when you log into your car, very much the logic of a smartphone, that we need to be the architect of that. That is why we are significantly increasing our resources in software engineering, and our team in Tel Aviv is playing a crucial role in this. I'm so happy that we made the decision some years ago to set up that digital hub in Tel Aviv, because it's now like an integral part of our overall engineering organization, and we couldn't do without it. Next to our home base here in Germany and Tel Aviv, where else are we in the world? Well, needless to say, you need to be where the action is, where the talent is, and where innovation is. So in the United States on the West Coast, we've been in Sunnyvale in Silicon Valley for more than 2 decades. But we also opened up a few years ago, about the same time, maybe a little bit earlier than Tel Aviv, our cloud hub in Seattle, the cloud computing capital of the world, you could argue. We have a huge tech center in Bangalore. It's the biggest one outside of Germany. Thousands of smart people working for Mercedes-Benz, both on vehicle engineering, but also in our enterprise IT organization. And every time I go there, I'm just flabbergasted by the speed of development and the enthusiasm that we're seeing there to contribute to our technical future. And in Asia, our biggest market in China, of course, in Korea, in Japan. And our newest startup in Germany, we chose Berlin. Why Berlin? Berlin is a little bit like a Tel Aviv in terms of a magnet for young talent and also for startups in Germany to establish themselves. And when you walk into the office in Berlin, you hear, I don't know how many languages, there are 30 nations working there. So English is the standard language in our Berlin office. And I believe we have some Israelis also that have come to work for us there. So not only do we have an Israeli footprint in Tel Aviv, we have it in Berlin also. We team up with companies. One example is on driving assistance autonomous drive. We have made a strategic partnership with NVIDIA because we thought that they had, in our assessment, the most performing chips with the highest computing standards that we're looking forward to in the next generation of driving assistance systems. But it's not the only partnership. We have several. Some of them we make public. Some of them we keep to ourselves. And the message here is co-innovation. Much of the innovation happens inside Mercedes, and we do it ourselves. But we have always been a good integrator of technologies, working with supply partners. And for all of those who are listening, we're open-minded, and we're always looking for people that share our vision of, pioneering innovation and breaking new ground in technology. So the shop is open for business. I mentioned these screens and MBUX now 2.0, and this is my segue into electric mobility. Intelligence, convenience, those are things that the customer, the driver, is looking for. Here, an example, if you buy an electric car, an EQC, an EQA, or the EQS that is coming, we are connected already today to more than 500,000 public charging points. No matter what trip you take, the computer will calculate the smartest trip for you, where you should charge, where you should make a stop, and so on and so forth, how you should drive. You can also have different driving modes to stretch your range, these types of things. So intelligence, artificial intelligence and algorithms, learning, and also learning the behavior of the driver, making suggestions based on the behavior of the driver. These are things that are already reality today, but will play an even bigger role tomorrow. So I come to my second point, decarbonization. For us, when we announced Ambition 2039 about 2 years ago, we had made a very clear strategic decision. Humanity needs to solve the CO2 problem. We sign up to the Paris Climate Agreement, not because we have to, because we want to. We know that this is going to be a gigantic task for humanity to solve this if we go through all the industries and everything that needs to happen to eventually go net zero, and even then starting taking CO2 back out of the atmosphere to create a minus situation, preferably in this century. But our piece is we're going to do it. We have some of the best engineers in the world. Let's not take a defensive approach to this. Let's think about this as an engineering problem that needs to be solved, a difficult engineering problem, but that needs to be solved. And it can be solved. It is multidimensional. And I think maybe the financial aspects of this and how we transform a society, technologies, and industrial footprints, perhaps that's the even bigger challenge than, quote unquote, just the engineering challenge. But we're committed to it, and it's so much more than just looking at making an electric car. That would be too one-dimensional. We have to look at it upstream and downstream, supply chain, our own production, the car, how the car is used, where the energy comes from, and so on. That's why Ambition 2039 is a 360-degree approach towards carbon neutrality. What does that mean? That means that in this decade, we're going to switch over from being today dominant combustion-based to dominant electric. It's perhaps too difficult to say, a little bit crystal ball to know exactly where is each market going to be in 2030. We don't know, but we're going to put ourselves in a position that we can be dominant electric in any market where the market conditions allow. We have set as a minimum ambition to have a 50% share of xEVs by 2050. And depending on how things play out in the market, regulatory pressures and so on, if a market goes steeper, we will be able to be there. We can see that there is momentum. There's very strong political momentum in Europe and in some other countries. But you can also see in the United States that the ambition is high now, and China has made it part of their strategic goal to also go carbon neutral and push so-called new energy vehicles. It's not just a passenger car thing. Of course, it is every form of mobility. And we're a company that does everything from a 40-ton truck, the Actros truck, all the way down to a small two-seater city car with the smart. So we have everything. So the trucking people bus people are working on the exact same thing. In terms of trucking, yes, for shorter distances to medium distances, we believe also that battery electric is the name of the game. But we're also putting another horse into the race for the 40-ton truck that needs to go maybe up to 1,000 kilometers a day. And this is where the fuel cell could come into its own and be the technology of choice. And that's why we have kicked off a major project on fuel cell for heavy trucks together with one of our competitors to industrialize that in the second half of this decade. So trucking, which is a total cost of ownership based business, they're very sensitive to cost. Once regulation and variable cost starts pushing a trucking use case towards TCO parity, then this is actually a business that could switch over relatively quickly. Excited that we are in a leading position here, but not something where we should rest on our laurels by any means, but try to make the gradient even steeper. I mentioned this 360-degree approach. Here's an example of our newest factory. This is a greenfield factory on a brownfield site in Sindelfingen, one of our oldest production sites just outside of Stuttgart. We opened this factory in September of last year. And this is the factory that builds the S-Class and the EQS. That it is CO2 neutral from the word go, I think that's a given. But not just in terms of reducing CO2. We're looking at waste management. We're looking at water management. It is the first factory that I feel that I've seen in the world that has fully implemented what is sometimes referred to as Industry 4.0, a completely digitized factory where everything is connected with each other. And I know we have been talking at Mercedes about this forever and a day, the paperless factory where you don't run around with a lot of paper also that's sometimes stuck with the car production orders and other things, assembly things that go with the vehicle. I think we have probably almost made it now to create a complete paperless factory. So sustainability is more than just dealing with the main issue, CO2. It is about resource preservation in all dimensions. And I want to end with just a small teaser for the EQS, which will be the flagship car in our new electric family, a true luxury sedan in a size that is not available in the market today, a true sibling to our flagship, the S-Class, with a WLTP range of more than 700 kilometers, the amazing Hyperscreen that I talked about before, and then all the bells and whistles that you would expect from a Mercedes. Let's have a look at this film.
Thank you very much, Ola. I think wanted to thank you for that presentation on really the future of mobility and where the mobility is going. I just wanted to ask you one question. When you were here in Israel, actually 5 years ago, I wanted to know what actually you saw in Israel that made you move forward with creating the R&D center here. I think that would be really interesting for a lot of people who are watching today from Israel and around the world.
Well, of course, I think my very first trip was back in 2015, but I've had a lot of contact before that with Israeli tech companies. So I kind of had a high expectation, and I'd also heard from others that had been active in Tel Aviv and in and around Tel Aviv. Ola, it's the place to be. You got to go there. It is kind of the little brother to the Silicon Valley, but maybe the smarter little brother. And when I came there the first time and followed up with a series of trips, two things struck me: the people and the attitude. This innovation attitude and can-do attitude, anything is possible and anything can be invented. That's what convinced me. I said, we got to be here. Here's an atmosphere, and here's a group of people, know-how and intelligence that we as a company, we need to tap into it, not just from afar, but actually be on location and be able to have a pulse, a finger on the pulse, and at the same time have some of our activities in Israel. And that's why we made the decision to set up shop.
Okay, and one last question before we turn over to Dafna. I asked you actually back in 2015 what was keeping you awake at night, and you talked about the carbon footprint, and really it's quite amazing how you've managed to move the company to carbon neutral. I wanted to know what was keeping you awake at this point in time.
Well, I think the whole topic of CO2 should keep us all awake. Because I think this is one of the issues. It's one of the defining, maybe the defining task that we have ahead of us here in the next decade. And I believe if everybody pulls together, it's a problem that can be solved. So that one still keeps me up, because now we have made a plan, but we have to execute that plan, and that's going to be a lot of hard work. What I am hugely excited about is the whole notion of how everything gets connected with everything else, and how the vehicle is then, it's kind of the final step from moving from the vehicle being its own island to the vehicle being a thing in the Internet of Things, a smart thing in the Internet of Things. It's going to improve safety. It's going to improve traffic flows. It's going to make your trip so much more pleasurable. So as a business, I'm hugely excited about this.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Just wanted to now introduce Dafna Maor, who's the World Business Editor at The Marker, one of Israel's leading business magazines, who will interview you for the next while, and then we will be followed by a town hall with a number of questions from startups who are joining us today. Thank you very much, Ola, for joining us. And now I just want to turn it over to Dafna.
Thank you very much for having me here. I would like to follow up the question about Israel and ask, has the Israeli R&D Center fulfilled your goals? And what are your future plans for the center and for Israel?
In our network of digital hubs, as we call them, we assigned each digital hub with specific main tasks, but not just for itself, for Mercedes world as a whole. One of those tasks that we assigned to the Israeli office was to think about an infrastructure and the technology in and around cybersecurity. And that's why, together with the people that we have here in Sindelfingen, they are now, it's like a node. So without Tel Aviv and our office there, we could not execute our future software architectures in a cyber safe way. So the answer to the question is yes, it has fulfilled the hopes that we had for this team. And there's so much more to do, but it's more than that. It's also almost like a tech scouting outpost where we look at what's going on in the scene and we create connections between other parts of the company and companies that are active in the Israeli startup scene or tech scene in general. So it's a dual role, and now a few years on, it's like a given. They're part of the overall engineering network and will remain so.
So the car business is going through major changes. One of them is consolidations, maybe since 2008. Do you see this as a major risk for your brands or an opportunity maybe to establish them, to differentiate them? And do you consider cooperation with another manufacturers?
What's the magic of Mercedes-Benz and what's the brand promise of Mercedes-Benz? It's a combination between luxury and tech. We've always had this engineering core and engineering substance and pioneering spirit, but it's always been something more. It's been the car that you dream of. It has something special. It's the aesthetics. It's how it drives and all those things. So in luxury plus tech, I think both those are future trends. Luxury is here to stay and it's a growing business, and so is tech. So we believe in Mercedes as a potential winner in this transformation, but you can't take anything for granted. When you have an industry that's going through transformation or disruption, new players come in. Some of the incumbents are successful, some struggle. So we will have an upheaval in the auto industry in the next 10 years or more. In general, we intend to tackle that challenge on our own, but with partnerships. A major M&A deal or merger with another automaker is not something that is planned.
Mm-hmm. Disruption, one of them, I think maybe black swans was the COVID pandemic. For example, today we heard that February car sales in Europe suffered a major slump. Now, post-COVID, do you see people going back to cars? And is there a threat that government policy will lean towards public transportation? Could that maybe help the bus and truck businesses that you mentioned before?
Well, COVID was obviously an unwelcome black swan, and I can't see many positive things with it, to be totally honest. But it gave us perhaps also an opportunity to pause and reflect, and also think a little bit as a company, what's important for the company, where are we going, and for everybody to pause and reflect. I think one of those reflections has been how important your personal space is, the personal space that you have. And if we're looking and talking about personal space in terms of moving from A to B, it is the car. It's self-determined individual freedom. You can go anywhere you want when you want to do it. I think that is the gift from our founding fathers of this company to humanity, and it has changed the world. And I don't think that's going to go away. In a strange kind of way, COVID has reminded us how important that gift that we have taken for granted is. Now we got to make the gift without side effects, take away the CO2 and make the product smarter. So yes, I believe that COVID perhaps maybe in a strange way could help us as a business to grow.
Mm-hmm. Now, the electric car revolution is in full power. You mentioned having a goal of 50% market share in general in certain markets and so on. And Mercedes' new models are showing muscles. Now, we have currently a market leader in Tesla. And we all want to know the answer to the question. Do you see vulnerabilities in its position, and what will be your strength facing these vulnerabilities?
Everybody's rushing in now. Established players and new players, everybody. If I just look at what we're doing this year, Mercedes, we're launching 4 fully battery electric vehicles this year on the passenger car side alone. And I look left, right, and center, and it's like everybody's rushing in. I think the competitive intensity in the market is going to increase. We, as an established player, not only do we take our established competitors very seriously, the ones that we have been competing against for decades, but we also take the new players very seriously. So we have to focus on fulfilling the Mercedes brand promise, combine this luxury feeling with superior tech. If we do that right, there's going to be a very nice place for us also post-transformation. It's difficult to say, and I don't want to pass judgment on any of the other competitors, how successful or not successful they're going to be, but we're going to try to carve out our niche, our home turf in luxury mobility, CO2 free.
Okay. You mentioned fuel cells. That was my planned next question. What is the next stage in powering cars after electricity? Do you see anything more futuristic? Do you have any vision beyond the electric engine and maybe the fuel cells?
One should never underestimate creativity and ingenuity of engineers. So they always come up with something in the future and they surprise you. That's why the general attitude needs to be open-minded towards new technology and not dogmatic. But if I look at what's happening in the market right now, and what do we foresee for the next 10 years, we believe that the battery electric vehicle is going to be the main trend on the passenger car side. And the fuel cell, as I mentioned in my presentation, is where does it come into its own? It comes into its own where you have use cases where you need a lot of energy. So if you want to take a 40-ton truck 1,000 kilometers in a day, yes, you could do a battery to do that as well. Probably the battery would weigh 7 tons or something. And you come to a point where you say, does that make sense? Or should we maybe go to another energy storage, energy conversion solution? And that's why we have put that second horse in the race as well, because you can do the same thing with much less packaging space and a higher energy density through liquid hydrogen. But who knows if there is a unbelievable breakthrough on the battery side, doubling energy density beyond what we know today, it can swing in the other direction. We stay open-minded, but I believe right now that battery electric is probably the way to go for passenger cars, and the fuel cell comes in those heavier trucking or maybe some bus examples as well.
I remember in the 90s talking about energy with someone who was very enthusiastic about clean energy. He told me, why wouldn't cars be solar powered? And I think maybe we are a bit too far in technological terms from that, but maybe there will be other ideas.
Solar power could complement the energy if you put solar cells on the roof, but if you look at the amount of energy that you can absorb per kilometer, it's not so much. So you couldn't drive it just through solar, not yet at least.
Yes. I have a question that is maybe more personal, as a person that likes to drive and enjoys it. Yeah, how do you see a future where there are cars, but driving is becoming almost extinct or even a hobby? Speaking of autonomous cars, and of course, you mentioned that the vision is maybe a little bit late to become reality, but still people are talking about robo taxis, maybe robotic fleets of trucks going from and to logistical centers and so on. So how do you see that personally? And maybe you can tell us about your own personal angle.
Autonomous drive is coming, and it's coming step by step. I think it's going to be a while before the whole world in every vehicle is autonomous. That's a few years away, but it's going to come more and more. You mentioned the truck case. It's such an obvious thing. If you could, on the highways or in the interstates in the United States, have hub-to-hub autonomous trucks driving, it would significantly lower the cost of that transportation effort and also increase the safety of it. So those are things that we're working on, and I believe this will come. If we talk about the robot taxi in chaotic cities, before every car turns into a robot taxi, I believe it's a little bit farther away, but we will have more and more situations where the car takes over. We're not going to get rid of the steering wheel quite yet, so you will be able to drive for many years to come. But I can think of situations where, it's fun to drive, but sometimes maybe you've had a very long day at the office and you really just want to push a button and relax on the way home. And then you would be very happy if the car could drive autonomously. So gradually it will be a mix, but complete autonomous drive for everything, I think it's a little bit farther away.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. It's been very, very interesting talking to you. And I would like to invite Jason Weiss, COO of Axis Innovation, who will moderate questions from startups. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dafna. I wanted to now introduce Jason Weiss, the COO and Deal Flow Manager at Axis Innovation, who also was here with you, Ola, in 2015 to monitor the town hall with startups. Jason, take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Mr. Källenius. I'm Jason, as I mentioned, and we received many questions from startups from Israel and all over the world. And for now, I'd like to just call out 3 companies, 3 entrepreneurs who had questions and have them ask your question directly. So first, Stefania from Razor Labs. Stefania, can you hear me? If not, let's go to, oh, there you are, Stefania. She's loading up right now.
Hi. Yes. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for really this great and very in-depth talk, Ola. I'm Stefania. I'm from Razor Labs, an artificial intelligence company. And my question is, how do you decide when to do something internally with all those, great innovation hubs that you described to us before? Versus to seek, external help through partners or startups or vendors? Is it always based on a specific challenge or problem area, or do you look at innovation more opportunistically?
I think sometimes it's also opportunistic, perhaps even a little bit chaotic, but there is a master strategy behind what's going on at Mercedes at the moment. For a long, long time, we were the masters of integration. We bought ECUs, kind of small computers with software packages from suppliers, and we tied them all together and created a great vehicle with a lot of functions. We're now in a paradigm shift away from that philosophy into a new philosophy where we say we have to be the architect of the master software stack, really 360 degree. And we are building up an insourcing. So we're going through actually a period of vertical integration here at the OEM, away from suppliers. Does that mean that we then stop working with others? Not at all. You have to have an open, even if it's a proprietary software stack, it needs to be open and speak to everything else out there, and including all the ecosystems that you're used to from your smartphone world. So we work in a interactive way with big and small companies alike. So if there is a startup that has a unique technology that could fit into a Mercedes, knock on our door. If you're in Israel, talk to the people in Tel Aviv first, and we're open for discussion.
Great, we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefania. Next, I'd like to call up Ari from AudioBurst.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, my name is Ari Applebaum from AudioBurst, the AI-based audio search and delivery platform. We've created the world's largest index library of talk audio content, and we allow car makers such as Daimler to tap into that and offer next generation listening experiences. And my question is, what will the car business look like in 10 years from now in a way that consumers are maybe not expecting?
If I look at the business model, I think the business model is changing. If I make a comparison to the smartphone world, maybe a company like Apple, they still sell these fantastic devices, but the device comes with a world of opportunities. And the car is now moving from being just a device to also a device with a world of opportunities. So the business model, with everything electronically being over-the-air downloadable in the future, much already today in a Mercedes, but in the future, literally everything, the car can also turn into partially a digital subscription for driving assistance systems or any other use case that you can think of inside a car. So for us, the business model is also changing from just thinking we are selling beautiful hardware with some electronic components in them to selling beautiful hardware, but with a digital ecosystem to go with it. And for consumers, great news. Everything that you know today is going to be even better tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Asaf from Continuum.
Yeah, hi. Hello, Ola. Thank you for the speech. Really interesting. My name is Asaf. I work at Continual, and Continual provides both car manufacturers as well as the mobile operators an opportunity to improve the connected mobility experience, whether it's a commuter, but more than that, the cars and the passengers and the drivers, we're letting them experience the best connected experience while they're on the move on the roads. So I did have a question for you when I listened to your speech. So you mentioned also the most recent model that's about to be launched, I think, in April. Maybe what's the one coolest feature out of the many that I'm sure it has in that latest vehicle that you're most excited about?
The coolest feature is the hyperscreen that I showed you. But the hyperscreen, which in essence is, a very large screen in the center, the instrument cluster, but also a dedicated screen for the passenger in the front and two screens in the back as well. We call the whole thing a multi-seat entertainment. Now, for those of you who have driven larger vehicles, there has been rear seat entertainment and different solutions for different places in the car before. This car, and I know I'm slightly biased here, is the first one that really gets it right, where every single seat in the car is thought through. Let's say a parent is watching a movie on the front passenger seat and wants to share that movie with one of the children in the back. It is literally a drag and swipe, and electronically you throw that movie back to one of the back seats, and the kids can also throw things back and forth between them. If the driver does what the driver shouldn't do, finds it's exciting what these people are watching, the driver takes the eye off the road and starts watching the movie on that front passenger screen, then the eye tracking in the car blackens the screen and gently reminds the driver that that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to look outside the window. If you're in level 3 automated mode on the highway in a traffic jam, fine, go ahead, you can do that. But the system is so smart that through eye tracking, it can recognize whether the driver is actually looking at the side mirror because they want to change lane, or if they're watching the movie. So all these little things, including, and we talked about artificial intelligence, that this MBUX 2.0, it starts learning about you. So on that huge screen in the middle, it almost kind of knows what you want before you know it, and it will make intelligent suggestions based upon the driving situations and throw that content up onto the highest level. So there is no searching for functions through many menus in this system. It's so intuitive. I sometimes say as a joke inside the company, it's so intuitive that either a 5-year-old kid or a board member at Daimler can operate it.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Asaf. Thank you, Ola. We have a few more questions from our ecosystem, and one of them is related to digitization, which you spoke about, a really exciting progress and activity you have. And in your Mercedes-Benz strategy update from last year in October, you mentioned 6 pillars. One of them, which is to embrace customers and grow current revenue, and have a stated goal of 1 billion euros in EBIT by 2025 from digital services alone. Could you elaborate on how you plan to achieve this very ambitious goal?
The good news is we've already started. So we have a few hundred million already today in this category through over-the-air downloads and digital content that you more or less buy as an app store. I mean, you can of course buy these things at the point of sale. You can buy them outright. You can buy a subscription, and you can add things over the air as time goes by. Next to that business model that I mentioned that is changing, here's another thing that I think is exciting about that. In the old world, when you bought a car, the car had reached its technical peak in terms of the performance of that vehicle at the time of the purchase. That is the highest point of technology that you're ever going to have in that car. That's not true anymore, because now we can add technology during the ownership. So much like a good French or Israeli wine that gets better if it lies a few years on the shelf, we are also going to make the car better over time. And I think that creates value. It creates value obviously for the customer, but it creates a business opportunity for us. And that's what behind that whole thinking about the billion EBIT in 2025.
Thank you very much. Next question is about risk and failure. And when we're talking about startups, it's really a part of the game. You have to take risks, you have to accept failure. And I'm very curious, for Mercedes-Benz, and you're on the cutting edge of innovation and technology, how do you approach these topics of risk and potential failure for a new innovation?
As a matter of fact, I had a conversation yesterday with a group from engineering about this. And we talked about it. We said, we are also a startup. We just happen to be 135 years old. But the original startup in the car industry, actually. But jokes aside, yes, when you become a very large organization and there is a certain expectation on your brand that you don't necessarily put kind of a beta Mercedes out there that might work, but might also not work, because the customer expects perfection from somebody with our brand promise, it can lead to being more conservative. And we constantly have this balancing act between perfection, but also doing crazy things that are really out there. And we try to keep that balance. The new S-Class that we have been talking about, it's a marvel of technology. It has so many innovations. We don't have time today to talk about all of those things, but we literally say for new vehicle generations, we write down in a blue sky way, we write down all of the crazy things that you could possibly do with a vehicle. And then as we go through vehicle engineering, we select the winners, the ones that we think are going to have the most value for the customer and then also create the most value for us. So we try to, even though we seek quality perfection, not to be too conservative. We got to be a brand that delivers on this pioneering spirit from our founding fathers. And I think mostly we get that balance right.
Thank you very much. So the last question I have is, looking forward, if you were to give advice to startups, young entrepreneurs, developers, and even students today, why should someone look at the automotive industry? Why should someone join the automotive industry for their career?
I talked about this self-determined individual freedom, the machine that changed the world and is going to continue to be the basis for prosperity and freedom. The car is a high-tech product, the most high-tech of products. There's significantly more line codes in a Mercedes S-Class in terms of software intelligence than there is in the most sophisticated of fighter planes. So if you are tech interested, tech oriented, and want to work on a product that every one of us knows, I mean, everybody has an opinion on cars, right? And if you want to work for an exciting brand that creates a little bit more, kind of has the X factor, not just the utilitarian, let's go from A to B purpose, but pushes some of those emotional buttons as well, then you can join a combination between a luxury and a tech company, and it's called Mercedes-Benz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Källenius. I will pass it back over to Ed.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ola. It's really been a pleasure hosting you today. I think a lot of your ideas and the future of mobility really affects all of us. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to your staff, to Laura, who really worked to make sure that everything went smoothly. And looking forward to seeing you in Israel. For those participating, we have a break now for the next 25 minutes, where we'll be having a masterclass taught by Professor Pedro Moreno, joining us from the IE University in Spain on the future of marketing. And of course, Ola, who grew up in marketing to become the CEO. Marketing is changing. It's going beyond your television and beyond your cell phone. I think that'll be a really exciting masterclass. Please join us in the auditorium. Thank you for joining us, and have a good break. And we'll see you in 15 minutes past the hour. Thank you very much, Ola, for joining us. And
thank you.
Be
Thank
well.
you.
Okay, thank you.